The psychology of cutting everyone off, why isolation feels like freedom, the sound of silence. There's a specific kind of silence that arrives after years of noise. Not the silence of an empty room. The silence of a phone you've stopped checking, of group chats you've left unread, of birthdays that pass without a single text, and the startling realization that you don't miss hearing from anyone at all. You didn't plan this. You didn't wake up one morning with a manifesto to burn every bridge in your life. It happened slowly, quietly, one unanswered text at a time, one declined invitation after another, until eventually you stopped pretending, stopped explaining, stopped showing up for people who never showed up for you. Maybe you recognize this. Maybe you are the cold one, the one who changed, the one who cut everyone off. The one people whisper about at gatherings you're no longer invited to. But here's what they don't see. You were already alone long before you left. The awakening, the phone that stopped ringing. You look at your phone and realize you haven't texted anyone in months. No birthday plans, no weekend plans. Just you, your routine, and this strange sense of relief you didn't expect to feel. When someone asks if you want to hang out, "I'm busy" used to be an excuse. Now it's a boundary. The difference? You're not apologizing anymore. The years before the breaking, this didn't happen overnight. You didn't wake up heartless. You woke up after years of being the friend who always showed up, who drove hours for someone's crisis, who remembered birthdays and asked how people were doing and actually listened to the answer. You were the reliable one, the one people called when they needed something. Then you needed something. You had your own crisis, your own breaking point. Your own 3 a.m. moment when you couldn't hold it together anymore. You reached out. You asked for help. Silence. Maybe one person sent a "sorry to hear that" text. Maybe someone said they'd call and never did. Maybe they were all just really busy right now. It wasn't that no one came. It's that you realized, in that moment, how alone you'd always been. The math that changed everything. Every interaction became a cost-benefit analysis you didn't want to run but couldn't stop running. How much energy does this take? What am I actually getting back? The math stopped making sense. You were pouring from an empty cup into cups that were never empty to begin with. They just wanted more, so you stopped pouring. People noticed. Of course they noticed. When you stop being available, when you stop texting first, when you decline every invitation until the invitations stop coming, people notice. They just don't notice why. You've changed. You're so cold now. What happened to you? They say it like an accusation, like you owe them the version of yourself that was slowly dying from giving too much. They want the old you back, the one who said yes, who made time, who put everyone else first. They don't realize the old you couldn't survive. The pattern, what your nervous system learned. Your nervous system figured something out before your conscious mind did. It learned a pattern every time you let someone in. Every time you trusted, every time you showed up with your whole heart, eventually, you'd end up alone with the pieces. The friend who disappeared when you got depressed, the partner who left when you needed them to stay, the family who was there for holidays, but nowhere when you actually needed family. Your brain started seeing the ending in the beginning. You'd meet someone new, start building a connection, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet voice would ask, "How long until this one leaves too?" It wasn't cynicism. It was data, taking control of the exit, so you started controlling the one variable you could control, the exit. If everyone leaves eventually, you decide when. You cut them off before they could cut you off. Abandonment hurts less when you're the one who initiates it. At least this way, you saw it coming. People call it self-sabotage. You call it self-preservation. The art of disappearing. It's not dramatic. There's no big fight, no final confrontation where you tell them everything they did wrong. It's quieter than that. It's not answering texts for days that turn into weeks, that turn into months. It's declining invitations until your absence becomes normal and they stop asking. It's moving to a new city and not telling anyone until you're already gone. It's deleting social media without an announcement, without a goodbye, without giving anyone a chance to ask you to stay. It's the slow fade. Or sometimes it's the hard cut. Either way, you're gone. The shallow encounters. You run into someone you used to be close with. They ask how you've been. You say, "Good, you." Small talk. Surface pleasantries. Inside, you're thinking we were never really friends. We just knew each other's names. We occupied the same space but never the same world. They never saw you. You just performed a version of yourself you thought they wanted. And when that version got too tired to perform anymore, there was nothing left. The truth nobody tells you. You were already alone in rooms full of people. Being physically alone just made the feeling match the reality. Beyond hate, the territory of indifference. Some people think you hate them. The reality is worse than that. You're indifferent. Hate requires energy, requires caring enough to hold on to the anger. You're past that. You're not running from them anymore. You're just done. They want closure. They want the conversation where you explain what happened, where you tell them what they did wrong, where you give them a chance to apologize or argue or fix it. But closure would require explaining yourself to people who never listened. Closure would mean reopening wounds that finally stopped bleeding. So you give them nothing. Let them write whatever story they need to write about you. You're not reading it. The unexpected piece. Here's the part that surprises you. It doesn't hurt like you thought it would. The solo holidays. The birthday that passes with no texts. The emergency where you handle it yourself because there's no one to call. You expected it to feel devastating. Instead, it just feels quiet. And quiet became your favorite sound. The blueprint of abandonment. This pattern didn't start in adulthood. Somewhere back in childhood, you learned that people leave or people hurt. Maybe a parent who was there physically but gone emotionally. Maybe a home where love came with conditions you could never quite meet. Maybe you were the kid who learned to handle everything alone because asking for help meant hearing not now or figure it out yourself, or worse, nothing at all. Maybe you watched a parent walk out. Maybe you experienced divorce not as a sad ending, but as proof that people don't stay, no matter what they promise. Maybe you were the child of parents who stayed but shouldn't have, who filled the house with silence or anger, teaching you that connection doesn't equal safety. When feelings became burdens, or maybe it was subtler than that. Maybe your emotional needs just weren't convenient. You'd come home from school upset about something and the response was, "Don't be so sensitive," or "Other kids have it worse," or "That's nice, honey," while they scrolled their phone. You learned that your feelings were burdens, that needing emotional support was asking too much. Maybe you were the kid who stopped crying because crying made people uncomfortable, stopped asking for help with homework because the sighs and eye rolls hurt worse than struggling alone, learned to celebrate achievements quietly because enthusiasm annoyed people or made siblings jealous, or reminded parents of their own failures. The lessons that shaped you, those early experiences, didn't just hurt you, they taught you. Your brain, still developing, still trying to make sense of the world, absorbed a fundamental lesson. Needing people is dangerous. Depending on someone means giving them the power to let you down. Connection equals eventual abandonment. Vulnerability gets weaponized. So your nervous system adapted. It built protective mechanisms before you even knew what you were protecting. You became independent not because you wanted to be, but because you had to be. Self-sufficient not as a choice, but as survival. You learned to need no one because needing someone meant getting hurt. You learned to expect nothing because expecting anything meant disappointment. You became the kid who didn't ask for rides, who figured things out alone, who stopped inviting friends over because "my family is complicated" was easier than explaining why home didn't feel safe. Reading the room. You became skilled at reading rooms, detecting moods, knowing when to make yourself small or disappear entirely. Those early relationships became your blueprint. They drew the map of what connection looks like, what love feels like, what you can expect when you let someone in. Every adult relationship that followed just confirmed the lesson. Eventually, you'll be alone. Eventually, you'll need someone and they won't show up. Eventually, the love will run out or come with too many conditions, or disappear when you stop being useful or entertaining or easy. Your brain wired itself around this truth. Connection became dangerous. Trust became expensive. Vulnerability became a risk you couldn't afford to take anymore. So when you cut people off, you're not being cruel. You're being consistent with everything your life has taught you about how relationships end. What they say, the accusations sting anyway. You're too closed off. You don't let people in. You're afraid of intimacy, like you haven't tried. Like you haven't spent years attempting to be different, to trust differently, to believe that maybe this time it would be different. Like you haven't forced yourself to be vulnerable again and again, hoping the outcome would change. It didn't change. The pattern repeats. The friend you opened up to about your depression suddenly got busy every time you reached out. The partner who said they wanted all of you disappeared when you showed them the parts that weren't easy. The family member who promised they'd be there went silent when being there require actual effort. Same pattern, different people, identical ending. The moments you remember the specific moments. The text you sent at 2 a.m. when you were falling apart. Read, but never answered. The phone call you made asking if they could talk. Can I call you back? And they never did. The crisis where you needed someone to just sit with you and they said, I'm sorry you were going through this, like you were a stranger, not someone they claimed to care about. The one-sided ledger you remember showing up to their emergencies, dropping everything, canceling plans, driving across town at midnight because they needed you. Then when you needed them, suddenly everyone had reasons. Work is crazy right now. Going through my own stuff. I'm not good at this kind of thing. I don't know what to say. All valid statements that mean the same thing. You're on your own. The final calculation, so you stop trying. Not because you're broken, because you finally started listening to what your nervous system has been screaming at you for years. This costs too much. The price of connection, the vulnerability, the hope, the inevitable disappointment is higher than what you're getting in return. You're spending emotional currency you don't have on people who aren't even checking the balance. The devastating data, you started doing the math. How many times did you reach out first versus them? How many conversations centered their problems versus yours? How many times did you adjust your schedule, change your plans, sacrifice your needs, and how many times did they do the same? The data was devastating. You weren't in relationships. You were in performance contracts where you did all the performing. Why isolation makes sense. People don't understand why you choose isolation over connection. They don't see that for you, isolation isn't the opposite of connection. It's the absence of rejection. It's the one space where you can't be abandoned because there's no one close enough to leave. It's not about hating people. It's about protecting the small part of yourself that's still capable of trust by refusing to spend it where it won't be honored. Becoming a detective, you became a detective of abandonment patterns. You can spot the signs now, within the first few conversations. The friend who only texts when they need something. You see it in how they never ask how you're doing, just launch into their latest drama. The person who's present when life is good but gone when it gets hard. You notice how they're always available for fun, but have 1,000 excuses when you're struggling. The relationships that feel like transactions where you're always the one paying. You feel it in your bones, that familiar weight of keeping score. You wish you didn't have to keep seeing it coming. You see it coming from miles away. The moment when their responses get shorter, when let's hang out soon becomes a placeholder for never. When they start every text with an apology for not responding sooner. When you become the friend they'll definitely call. When things calm down but things never calm down. When you're always the one suggesting plans, and they're always the one who would love to, but the pattern of disappearance, you know the pattern of someone slowly exiting your life. It starts with longer gaps between texts. Then the texts get more surface level. Less how are you actually doing and more hey, hope you're well. Then they stop responding to the real stuff. Then they stop responding at all. Then months pass. Then you're strangers who used to know each other's secrets. Cutting it short, you've watched this pattern repeat with enough people that you stopped being surprised by it. Nah, you just cut it short. At the first sign, the first canceled plan, the first distracted conversation, the first time you feel yourself trying too hard, you pull back. Not dramatically, just quietly. Stop initiating. Stop trying. See if they notice. They rarely do. That tells you everything you need to know, so you leave first. Not with anger. Not with drama. Just with the quiet knowing that you've been here before and you already know how it ends. You've seen this movie too many times to sit through it again, hoping for a different ending. The truth, what you actually gave up. Some people say you've given up on people. They're wrong. You gave up on pretending that conditional acceptance is the same as being seen. You gave up on relationships where you have to shrink or perform or earn your place. You gave up on explaining yourself to people who were never trying to understand you. They were just waiting for you to admit you're the problem. You're not the problem. You're not the problem. The problem is that for years you accepted crumbs and called it connection. You accepted being someone's last choice and told yourself at least you made the list. You accepted love that came with fine print and convinced yourself that's just how it works. You normalized relationships where you did all the emotional labor, all the reaching out, all the caring, and told yourself it was enough that they answered sometimes, showed up occasionally, remembered you existed when it was convenient, until one day you couldn't anymore. What cutting off really means, cutting everyone off, isn't giving up on connection. It's refusing to settle for the hollow version you've been handed over and over again. It's saying, if this is what relationships are, this constant one-sidedness, this endless performing, this waiting for people to show up who never do, then I'd rather have none. Not cold, just done. People call you cold. You're not cold. You're just done bleeding for people who never even noticed you were wounded. You're done performing emotional labor for relationships that only work when you're the one doing the work. You're done being the one who cares more, tries harder, stays longer, forgives faster, gives more chances. Walls versus boundaries. They say you've built walls. You built boundaries. There's a difference. Walls keep everyone out indiscriminately. Boundaries keep the wrong people out and give the right people, if they ever show up, a chance to matter. But after enough years of only the wrong people showing up, the boundary starts to look like a wall. Maybe it is. Maybe that's what survival looks like after you've been burned enough times. The real loneliness, when you were loneliest, the loneliest you ever felt, wasn't when you cut everyone off. It was before. It was sitting in a room full of friends and feeling invisible. It was being in a relationship and still feeling fundamentally alone. It was needing help and watching people look the other way, or offer hollow platitudes that made you feel worse for asking. The gap, it was the gap between what connection was supposed to feel like and what it actually felt like. Always giving, rarely receiving. Constantly performing, never quite enough. The physical isolation didn't create the loneliness. It just stopped pretending the loneliness wasn't already there. The old photos, you scroll through old photos sometimes. Birthdays, group trips, nights out that look like friendship from the outside. You don't miss those people. You miss the version of yourself who still believed those connections were real, who thought if you just tried harder, cared more, gave enough, they'd finally show up for you the way you showed up for them, who hadn't yet learned that some people would take everything you offer and still act like you never gave them anything at all. The version that almost didn't make it. That version of you almost didn't make it. She gave until there was nothing left to give. He poured himself into people who took and never thought to fill him back up. They nearly drowned in the emptiness of relationships that only flowed one direction. How you saved yourself by leaving. People see it as running away. You know it's running toward something, toward peace. Toward the kind of quiet that doesn't come from loneliness but from finally choosing yourself. Toward a life where you're not constantly bracing for the next person to prove you're not worth staying for. Toward mornings where you don't wake up wondering which friend is going to let you down today. The possibility maybe one day you'll try again. Maybe you'll meet someone who makes connection feel safe instead of terrifying. Maybe you'll find people who show up without you having to beg them to see you. Maybe you'll learn that not everyone leaves, not everyone takes. Not everyone uses your vulnerability against you. Maybe. But right now, you're protecting the part of yourself that still remembers what it felt like to hope for more. You're keeping that small flame alive by refusing to let anyone blow it out again, because the next disappointment might be the one that extinguishes it completely, and then you'd have nothing left, not even the possibility of trying again. The real meaning, what this actually is cutting everyone off, isn't the absence of love. It's the presence of self-preservation. It's your nervous system finally saying, enough. Enough performing. Enough pretending. Enough accepting less than you deserve and calling it connection. Enough breaking yourself into smaller pieces so you'll fit into spaces that were never meant for you. Who you really are, you're not cold. You're not broken. You're not the villain in their stories, no matter what they say about you when you're not there to defend yourself. You're not the problem. They made you believe you were every time a relationship failed, and they pointed to all the ways you were too much or not enough. The truth about you, you're just someone who learned the hard way that being alone is less lonely than being unseen in a crowd. Someone who chose quiet over chaos. Someone who finally stopped waiting for people to show up and started showing up for yourself. Let them say it. They'll say you cut everyone off like it's a character flaw. Like you're missing out, like you're running from something. Like if you just gave people more chances, tried harder, were more forgiving, were less sensitive, things would be different. Let them say it. You know better, you know the truth. You gave chances. You tried. You forgave more than most people would. You were sensitive because you actually paid attention, because you actually cared, because you actually showed up. You did everything they said you should do, and it still wasn't enough. The problem wasn't your effort. It was that you were giving it to people who never intended to match it. Not running, standing still. You're not running from anything. You're standing still, finally in a space where no one can leave you because you're the only one there. Where your worth isn't determined by who stays or who goes. Where the silence isn't empty, it's full of the peace you never had when you were surrounded by people who never really saw you at all. This is the psychology. This is the psychology of cutting everyone off. It's not about hating people. It's about loving yourself enough to stop accepting crumbs and calling it a feast. It's about recognizing that sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't staying and trying harder. It's leaving and finally putting yourself first. What you really are, you're not cold. You're clear. You're not closed off. You're protected. You're not giving up on connection. You're refusing to accept the broken version of it that's been offered to you over and over again. Let them whisper. Maybe that makes you hard to understand. Maybe it makes you someone people whisper about. Someone they use as a cautionary tale about what happens when you build walls, when you stop trying, when you give up on people. But you know something they don't. What's keeping you alive? Those walls are keeping you alive. That protection is what's allowing you to heal. That choice to walk away is what's finally giving you the space to become someone who might one day be ready to try again, but only on terms that honor who you are, not who people want you to be. Right here, right now, for now, you're here. In the quiet. In the space you cleared by cutting away everything that was slowly killing you. It's not the ending people wanted for you, but it's the one that's keeping you whole. The final truth: you're not cold. You're surviving. And maybe for the first time in your life, you're finally free.